Bitcoin cultures.
Yeah.
Giacomo Zucco.
Okay, well, this is about me, but I don't think it's. I mean, I see very familiar names. I had a formal education in physics. Then I did some consultants in Accenture. Then I did a few Bitcoin startups. Some are successful, some are shit and failed. And now I'm mostly shit posting on Twitter. That's my full-time job. Now I'm joking, but that's the perception. So as we said at the beginning, this talk is coming with a very good timing because there was some drama on culture about culture on Twitter. But this talk actually was conceived for the first time, 2 hours before my presentation in Las Vegas in I think it was March or February or something, 2022. It was a conference Unconfiscatable, and as you can see in this cropped image, my presentation was Tone asking me to re-give my presentation about the Perfect Lightning Wallet, which is the presentation I gave in Adopting Bitcoin conference in El Salvador. But a few hours before, I was like, no, I don't want to give that presentation again. I have a better idea. So I took my present. I just drew these Venn diagrams, and I gave these very short like this is 1 hour, but not because it's 1 hour talk. There is like a panel of 40 minutes. So it's basically a 20 minutes presentation. You may see that, you may watch that. It's I think it was funny because there were some inner jokes about people. I started to put people in the diagram, but it was not as I didn't really think thoroughly about the problem in a serious way like I did after that. And in Riga, a few weeks ago, during the Noob Days, the conference for noobs just before the main Riga conference, Baltic on Badger, I did it again. I redraw the Venn diagram completely in a way that I think is more interesting to watch and to discuss. So this was like the joke version, and now I try to do it's still shit posting basically, but there is some more reflection in it. So before or after you watch these, if you haven't done that already, I would suggest you to take a look at other two presentations. One was from the Pizza Day in Prague in 2022. It was Sergey from Bitrefill, and he gave a presentation about real building a circular economy, but he made a distinction between Bitcoin the tool, you can see that on the left of the screen, and Bitcoin the movement. And in Bitcoin the movement, he analyzed some of the memes like HODL or stack sets, low time preference, number go up, hyper Bitcoinization, and he contrasted that as movement cultural tools with Bitcoin the tool in itself. I took some issues with Sergey's Venn diagram distinction, mostly because I am a Venn diagram nerd. So I used this presentation as well to make my own presentation a little bit more elaborate. And another presentation I would suggest you to take a look at after our chat today is this one, still in Riga, so a few days ago. It's by CoinSure. You can find it from the title, Bitcoin Psychopaths versus Bitcoin Sociopaths. It's a great talk, and it's actually also framing the Bitcoin culture as a counterculture. It doesn't dig very much into the subculture distinctions, which is what I'm planning to do today with you, but it does frame the cultural discussion of Bitcoin in a way that I think is very interesting, talking about phenomena like the nerd fan mobs sociopath distinction and the Eternal September framework. There are a lot of interesting things in this talk. So after this, as Rockstar and Jack just mentioned, this happened on Twitter. So basically, Dan held tweeted out, "Say no to Bitcoin fundamentalism," and basically somebody tweeted out this picture in order to mock Dan Held, of course, but with some interesting things, like you see the family with two kids, the red meat, the steak, Twitter, of course, the cold card, which triggered a lot of Trezor and Ledger aficionados, and the Bitcoin standards, and the priest, which is a little bit like an exorcist in this case, probably, with the cross and the gun, of course. So there was some people got triggered by this, like, oh my God, you cannot compare Bitcoin with religion or guns or meat. You cannot talk about this off topic. There is nothing that Bitcoin has to do with any of these. Absolutely, barely with the cold card, but not really, because more people uses Trezor, and not for sure with the book, because many Bitcoiners don't agree with the economic readings of the Bitcoin Standard, or even more the social readings of the importance of Bitcoin and Austrian economics and stuff. So I think that there was an escalation of memes after this. Like there was Dan Dark Peel tweeting out this one, which is a little bit different because there is still the family, but there is a bone broth instead of the steak. There is Nietzsche, not sure why, instead of the Bitcoin standards, and there is marijuana in the left corner, and the barefoot shoes, which is I also use those, and everybody's mocking me because of that. And there is like a metal steel seed backup tool, and a 3D printed pink like automatic weapon. And then there was like a lot of people basically waiting in. There was the official maintainer of the Bitcoin Core repository on GitHub that, of course, gave his contribution with the Bitcoin Fundamentalist Starter Pack, with a lot of pizza and a lot of coffee and a few number theory, algebra, and Linux nerd things. So it was kind of funny. I will start from a non really cultural depiction. I will start from a division of competence fields, and a division of knowledge areas. Basically, my starting point for this presentation will be to argue that you don't really understand Bitcoin, the culture, but even the tool. I mean, you can still use the tool, as many people uses many tools without having any conception of how the tool came to be. I mean, we are using the internet now. Most internet users are teenagers watching stuff on TikTok. They have no idea of TCP/IP version 4. They don't know the history of the internet. They don't know the cultural implication of the internet. They don't know the inner jokes of the internet builders. They don't know what the internet standard task force was, or the protocol war that took place in the 80s. They don't know anything of that, and they don't consider the philosophical implication of the internet, and they don't participate to inner internet jokes. The same goes with every kind of tool. But if you really want to understand the original the cultural origins of Bitcoin and some of its cultural implication, and the fact that Bitcoin is not just a tool, but as Sergey said, it's also some kind of movement, or as Coinsure said, I think more precisely, it is a counterculture. It's better to start from different areas of competence. One is, of course, the one which is reflected by the last meme by Vlad, by the core maintainer, is the area of engineers. So in order to understand Bitcoin and Bitcoin's origin, you have to be an engineer, or at least you have to understand some of this culture, which is very particular. You need to understand a little bit of computer science, a little bit of engineering of distributed systems, a little bit of math, like again, discrete algebra, cryptography, and stuff like that. You may not be a specialist, but it's very difficult to fully appreciate Bitcoin as a project, as and also as a world-changing tool, without any understanding of the engineering and the engineering culture. Then my point would be that yeah, of course, there are two different kinds of engineers that they don't often like each other. I would qualify one as the typical front-end engineers. They are very good at people-facing software. I call them front-end, but this basically means people very good at UX, like the people that are good at creating the slick user interface. And then there are the more like back to the essence, back-end developers, mostly focused on efficiency or safety, and maybe a little bit less on the front end. These are the typical command line tool engineers. These are more nerdish and a little bit less people oriented. They are a little bit more technology oriented. My point would be that in order to understand Bitcoin and its culture, you really have to get also the culture of the economic speculators. I don't use this term in a completely derogatory sense. I use this term in a neutral sense. Speculators can be the very short-term day scalpers, so people trading any kind of shit just to make a quick buck without any kind of fundamental analysis. You know, just the graph, the price chart monkeys trying to get a profit by scalping things, and they don't care what is it, what it isn't. They just seek a short-term profit. And then there is also a more noble meaning of the term, like long-term fundamental speculators that will actually consider the long-term value. They will analyze the market in a very significant way. So this is a more, let's say, this kind of speculator is more like an economist trying to study fundamentals of the things. They will ask questions about the essence of money and monetary phenomena, about time preference and about network effects and all this kind of stuff. Engineers, they usually don't like speculators. They think they are just normies. They don't know how to code, so they are basically useless. Engineers do stuff. They write code. They create tools. Speculators, as the term says, they just speculate, not just economically, but even when they perform long-term analysis, they are just speculating, you know, just theoretically. They write books. They don't write code. This is not a division. This is not a division in competing camps, because this is a Venn diagram. So there is an overlap. So that doesn't mean that no engineer can also be a speculator or understand speculation, and vice versa. There are some overlaps. A notable overlap would be like everybody knows Adam Beck. Adam Beck is actually a very pretty good trader. Not many people know that, but he is. And he loves to trade. And he is also an engineer, of course. He is one of the original OGs. And so there is a tension between these two groups. And I add that you don't really understand Bitcoin if you don't understand also some part of the third camp, of the third, let's say, area of competence, which is the area of the idealist. So the political, the idealist, the social activist. In my Las Vegas presentation, I called this third set, I called it revolutionaries. And then somebody like especially Michael Goldstein basically pointed out that it's not a very good name, because some of these are revolutionaries in the strict sense. They want to change everything. They want a revolution. Some of these are actually reactionaries. They want to go back to something like gold standard or pre-fiat society, neo-feudalism. It's not really about revolution. It's also about reaction, or even restoration. So I think the better term is idealist. These people are not in for the technology. These people are not in for the money, the speculation, the economical profit. These people are in to change the world. But if you are just an idealist and you don't understand anything about engineering, you may end up a little bit like Roger Varing yourself, into not understanding the technology and basically misallocating your expectation on the technology. And if you don't understand anything about the speculation, you don't understand the economic incentives that keep Bitcoin running. You don't understand how to basically make your Bitcoin journey sustainable in an economical sense. So even here, there is a lot of tension between these three areas. But my point will obviously be that there must be some balance. Also, the idealists are not a compact group. You can find different kind of Bitcoin idealists. For example, you can find the Bitcoin idealists that are more sensitive about freedom issues. So the typical, let's call them, to simplify, left libertarians. So like, you know, so yes, some economic freedom, but especially personal freedom, privacy, and weed, and we want to be free and self determination in my body, and cultural progressiveness and stuff like this. And then you have the people that are more oriented to virtue issues and not really freedom issues. For example, we have to go back to the society where there are less crappy architecture. Example, if we go back to sound money, we will make countryside cottages great again. But it's not just that, of course. It's about everything. It's the typical. I will call that the typical conservative side, maybe culturally conservatives, and that's very strong in Bitcoin. And you can see the provocative and, of course, tongue in cheek meme about Bitcoin fundamentalists was also about typical conservative issues like religion and guns and stuff like that. So there is this distinction. Of course, again, this is a Venn diagram. This doesn't mean that everybody should be on the left of this circle or on the right. Most people, some people, actually many of them are in the middle, and they share both. And we could call them maybe paleo-libertarians, if you wish. They have some kind of conservative social mindset, but together with an anarcho-capitalist kind of political framework. So there is a lot of nuances here. So starting from these areas, these general archetypes, what I think is funny and interesting is that the three subculture that I think emerged from the Bitcoin phenomenon and also somehow informed the Bitcoin phenomenon are actually not these three circles, but they are located at the very intersections. So my argument in this presentation is that the overlaps between these three circles are actually the main subcultures of Bitcoin right now. So let's start from the first, also chronologically speaking. The first is what is called cypherpunks. I assume that many of you are familiar with the term. The term is a wordplay on the cyberpunk literally genre. So the cyberpunk is this kind of dystopic future based science fiction literature genre, and where governments and corporations are basically controlling everybody, which today just seems like a newspaper, but back then was actually science fiction. So these guys, the cypherpunks, they took the word cipher, so it's a cryptographic code, and they played a word play on cyberpunk, and you use cryptography, cipher, in order to prevent or to fix a cyberpunk dystopic future. And this is the symbol of crypto anarchism, which is very strictly connected as a movement, as a political idea with cypherpunk movement. Crypto anarchism will be a political idea in which basically we don't have anarchy in a normal world because we always have some hierarchy of physical force. But assuming we can get access to the internet and to computers basically connected in the internet and to strong cryptography, then when we are online, we can be really in a state of anarchism, because when we are online, if the counterparty doesn't know who I am, they cannot come to my home to hurt me physically. If they can't, then it means that I can share idea, I can trade products, services, and it is basically anarchism, because since nobody can hurt me because nobody knows who I am or where I am, cryptographically enforced privacy will allow some kind of anarchy in the internet, basically in the cyberspace, to use a very outdated term. Of course, there are a lot of very famous names in the cypherpunk movement. It's a broadly defined, very loosely defined movement that includes, of course, Eric Hughes, Timothy May, John Gilmore, Adam Beck, Al Finney, Nick Szabo himself, Richard Stallman of the Free Software Foundation, Mark Andreessen, that now is a shitcoiner, but back then he was like an internet OG, Jacob Applebaum of Tor, Brian Cohen of BitTorrent, and Julian Assange, who is now in jail because he's a journalist. And so there is a lot of famous name in this camp. And there is not just it is not just something that happened before Bitcoin and that basically created the culture that created Bitcoin in turn. It's actually something that made Bitcoin mainstream for the first time. The first time that Bitcoin was mentioned in a political assembly in the U.S. Parliament was because of the first very very big Bitcoin-based market that was actually the Silk Road, created by Ross Ulbricht, which is now incarcerated and is basically he's imprisoned for two life terms for creating a website, basically, where people were peacefully trading stuff, mostly like recreational substances that are illegal in some places but not in others, and like marijuana. But not just that, like the most sold item on the Silk Road was actually books, because some books, religious books and not, they are forbidden in some countries. So if you count in the Silk Road item list by item, books were the most traded commodity on the Silk Road. And of course, also substances and a lot of stuff. So this was a very important cypherpunk milestone. And it's not over. Like right now, people complain that this spirit, you cannot find it anymore in Bitcoin. That's not true. The point is that this spirit is a little bit diluted because Bitcoin grew as a movement. So the number of cypherpunks active in Bitcoin didn't shrink. It actually grew. But the number of people involved in Bitcoin as a movement, and as a tool, especially the number of people using Bitcoin grew a lot out of this specific kind of personal archetype. So there is a lot of cypherpunks. Like right now, there are more markets like the Silk Road. The volumes are higher now than during the Silk Road peak, and there's more of this market, more of these people, and these ideas that Ross was trying to promote with this website, and that costed him maybe the rest of his life in a jail, are now more widespread than ever. The point is that they are more diluted across a bigger base of users, and also of influencers and intellectuals or pseudo intellectuals. But this is not over. And even now, if you look at the stuff going on in Bitcoin, there are purely cypherpunk tools, like I can name BSQ or a lot of other software. I put here Join Market as an example. Join Market is a privacy tool to use Bitcoin privately, and it's a typical cypherpunk tool because there is no corporation behind it, no company, no legal entity. You just run the software, and it's not even easy to run. It's a Python software that will crash a lot, and people are trying to make it better with a web interface, which is great and is growing as we speak. But it's a very cypherpunk thing to do. So it's not over at all. Then after the cypherpunk, so cypherpunks are idealists, they are activists, they have a political motivation, all of them, but they are also engineers. Their motto is cypherpunks write code. So they're not just talking, they're not just complaining about the government overreach. They are creating software tools to overcome or mitigate censorship and persecution and slavery and well, government in general. But there is another subculture which actually I think took over from, so the prehistory of Bitcoin, all the things that brought to Bitcoin, like from Hashcash to reusable proof of work of Alfini to B-Money of Wei Dai and BitGold of Nick Szabo, all this stuff were very strongly included into the cypherpunk cultural cultural humus in a way. But then when Bitcoin came out, it was perceived, and also it was represented in a way, it was depicted as a typical as a part of the typical startupper culture, you know, the typical Silicon Valley startup culture, which is very different from the cypherpunk culture. The like Satoshi, this image is the image of the open source initiative. You may remember, many of you know, that the open source movement started off as very political with Stallman and the Free Software Foundation, and a very strong ideological charge. And then like complementary to that, there was this kind of very neutral, politically neutral initiative, which was basically the open source initiative. So when people think about Joomla, or when people think about Drupal or Python, they don't, or Wikipedia right now, they don't really think about something which is like political activism. It's nothing cypher anarchist, or cypherpunk or crypto anarchist. It's just like software, which is, it's open because, permissionless innovation, open is better, but there's not much ideological charge. And that's actually something that you can find as well in the in Satoshi's white paper. So if you read some of the sentences by Satoshi, they are clearly political. He says, I'm better with code than with words, but I think Bitcoin can be a tool to achieve freedom from government overreach. And also some clues, like if you look at the Genesis block with the bailout of the UK banks in the 2008 crisis, it's a very strong political statement. Also, if you read like the official birthday of Satoshi in the forum, it was the day of Nixon suspending temporarily the gold standard, and the year of the year of the gold standard suspension, 1971, but the day of the executive order 6102 of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, basically confiscating the gold of all the American citizens in the 30s. So it was very political. But if you read the white paper itself, it's written in order to look like very apolitical. Like the white paper is all about, you want to do casual payments on the internet. There is nothing revolutionary in the white paper. It's the goal of the white paper is to present a technological innovation, which is the time chain. So it is the solution to the double spending problem. That's the goal. And the framing of the white paper is super like, don't scare people away, don't be overly political. And you can find some of these also when there is the famous exchange of the Bitcoin Talk user basically cheering because WikiLeaks was using Bitcoin, and Satoshi, which is basically cooling everybody down. Like, I wish they didn't do that, because we are not ready yet to face a nation state aggression. So maybe we should just stay low for a little bit more until we grow more. And there is like, you can go if you go on GitHub in the bitcoin.org website repository, you will find a huge fight between the Bitcoin developers like Gavin Andreessen and Mike Hearn, but even so basically now shitcoiners, but also like non-shitcoiners like Luke Dashier or Gregory Maxwell. Many people in the development community trying to keep Bitcoin very neutral against the more activist types like John Matonis or Andreas Antonopoulos, trying to frame Bitcoin as, honestly, of course, because Bitcoin is a tool with enormous political consequences, as more revolutionary. And there is a lot of infight between them. And you can appreciate actually the reason of both. Satoshi was not trying to be just it was not just lacking courage. It was trying to be tactical. It was trying to be smart about not overcharging the pirate currency angle, and try to stay more on the open source angle. And this is actually the kind of subculture that became mostly dominant when Bitcoin first went mainstream in 2013, 2014. When I approached Bitcoin at the end of 2012, I was very politically, I was an activist in many senses, and I was a little bit turned off by the fact that most lead developers, they were trying to basically tune this kind of aspects down. There is typically, this is a screenshot of the blog post from Mike Hearn. Mike Hearn was one of the most influential Bitcoin developers. He created Bitcoin J. It was very influential, and then he tried to basically change Bitcoin. He failed, and so he rage quitted, and he went to work for banks. And this is his article, the resolution of the Bitcoin experiment. Of course, actually, this moment represented the resolution of the Mike Hearn experiment as a Bitcoin developer. And he was I think he embodied the kind of developer. He worked for Google, now he works for big banks, and he wanted to keep Bitcoin very normal. He was horrified by the idea that Bitcoin can use for illegal things or whatever that means, of course, because everything is illegal in some jurisdiction. So he proposed to make Bitcoin tainting in order to blacklist illegal transactions and stuff like that. And then he rage quit because Bitcoin didn't follow this kind of image. Actually, if you keep looking at the way the mainstream is representing Bitcoin right now, you may see that this representation of Bitcoin is still the dominant one. Like if you look at the, this is a not very bad, not very good TV series startup where these guys basically create something like Bitcoin. And it's true that there is some interest in this tool by like drug dealers and stuff like that, but mostly it's perceived as a centralized typical startup. So you have the nerds incorporating an entity and creating a product. It's a bit for these people, for these normies, Bitcoin is seemed like an app, not like a peer-to-peer protocol that they don't even, I think that assume the writers of of this kind of series, they don't even understand what a peer-to-peer open source unstoppable cypherpunk protocol even means. And even if you read like the last Balazs book, Balazs of course is a shitcoiner as well, but is also very influential in Bitcoin because it was, I mean, he created a few huge companies, and now he published this book, which is not bad, I think, but his idea of political innovation is very startup-like. It's a different kind of culture from the cypherpunk ideal. It's more normie. It's more normalized in a way. So this is the subculture of startuppers. So the first one, the cypherpunks, was dominant in all the inception of Bitcoin, and kept it is still present right now. It was present with the Silk Road. It was present with Amir Taki. Is still present with the Join Market and many other cypherpunk tools. But the startup angle started to become more dominant after a while. So many people interacted with Bitcoin under this representation, under this subculture. And then there is a third one, which is in Las Vegas. I called this camp, this overlap, Austrians, because they are, especially we are, I mean, but they are, now I'm pretending to be neutral. I'm pretending to be like an external observer. They are particularly focused on Austrian economics, but I think it's probably more fitting to call them maximalists explicitly. So what are maximalists? What is Bitcoin maximalist? At the beginning, it was just a slur, like a way that former Bitcoin journalist and then quantum scammer and then shitcoiner Vitalik Buterin decided to use to describe, I would say, most of Bitcoin developers and activists. Right now, the term after this initial use, the term was reappropriated. You know that some slur, some negative terms, they get reappropriated by the targets. For example, in UK politics, Whigs and Tories, they were insults at the beginning. One means like basically like a street criminal, and the other means like they were like disparative terms, and they have been reappropriated. The same goes with queer. Queer was an insult, and now there's like a queer study faculty in some US universities, or all of them, I don't know. And the same goes with impressionist in art. Impressionist was actually an insult, was a way to ridicule impressionists, and they just decided to call themselves impressionists. Maximalist was the same. Vitalik framed everybody who was not okay with shitcoins as a Bitcoin maximalist. And then the term was reappropriated by most people, and we say, okay, you want to use the term, let's use the term in a semi-ironic sense. People started to self-identify as an actual maximalist. Like, yes, okay, I'm guilty as charged. I do think that that the shitcoins cannot be useful for many reasons. There are a lot of reasons for Bitcoin maximalism, and I will not dedicate too much. If you are more interested later on, I can focus a little bit more. But the main point of maximalism in this sense is that when you create digital scarcity once, you cannot recreate it infinitely, an indefinite number of time. So there is a fixed number of bitcoins. There is not a fixed number of cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies can be inflated just as fiat money, if not even more, and everybody can create as many as he wants. There is no supply cap in cryptocurrencies, so you cannot recreate digital scarcities. And so many of the former developers of Bitcoin, first developers of Bitcoin, the main ones, they were accused to be maximalists, and they are in this sense, but they didn't they didn't self-identify as ones. For example, if you think about Luke Dasher, he considers Ethereum a scam, which I think it is, and Litecoin as a scam, which I think it is, and Monero as a scam, which I think it is. Same goes for Gregory Maxwell. So all these people were included in this representation, but they didn't use the term, they didn't reappropriate the term. The term started to be reappropriated, strangely enough, by some guy that was not really a developer. It was an interesting guy, controversial guy for many reasons. And it was this guy. He passed away probably recently, like 1 year ago. His name is Mircea Popescu. He's like a super hodler. He was like a super hodler and a very interesting blogger. And he basically started to reappropriate the term maximalism. In his version, the term was not so much about being against shitcoins, which he was. He was very much against shitcoins, but especially he was against every kind of change in Bitcoin, every kind of sudden change or extreme change. Basically, he was an extremist of keeping Bitcoin stable as opposed to changing it, playing it with it, the protocol especially. It was the origin of the toxic status quo defender in Bitcoin against any kind of change, even like issued a death threat somehow to the Bitcoin developer Peter Willa. So it was a very strange guy. Today he, probably is more remembered for controversial takes on external topics like feminism and feudalism and stuff like that. But it was very influential. And then the term started to be associated, especially with the so-called Austrian Renaissance in Bitcoin. So many people were already considering stuff like inflation, time preference in the early origins of Bitcoin. Like in 2001, you can see a very young Peter Todd, 16 years old, exchanging emails with Adam Beck about the issuance schedule of Bitcoin. They are discussing inflation, and basically they're discussing stock to flow relationship without using these terms. But what Seyfeddian Ammous did was to actually take the traditional terminology and the traditional framework of the Austrian economics. Austrian economics is this school of economics which just like makes sense as opposed to the rest of the garbage economics. And it was developed by a few Austrian guys initially. So Menger, Mises, Hayek, and others. And so now many people associate the Bitcoin maximalism with Austrian economics and economical thinking and economical terms like, again, time preference and all this stuff. Many of the things that Sergey put in the Bitcoin the Movement slide, they were basically from this view of Bitcoin maximalism. So this kind of economic, if you read the Bitcoin Standard, you should read it. I think it's a great book, but it doesn't talk about Bitcoin for most, basically almost all of it. It basically talks about the history of money in a strong Austrian framework, and then he adds Bitcoin as the last part. Of course, there is also the Fiat Standard, which is another beautiful book, which is basically the follow-up of this. And this is also considered maximalism. And then there are like these guys, right? Right now, if you think about maximalists, you think about laser eyes, number go up, and Bukele, like the president of El Salvador, which is, I mean, it's curious because the same cultural movement that was theorizing crypto anarchism, some of it at least, is cheering up for a head of state, which is at least peculiar. I think there are some ways in which this is not contradictory at all, but it is for sure very paradoxical. And then there is Michael Saylor. It's very close to the Bitcoin Standard side of maximalism. Indeed, he was the second one to write the foreword to the Bitcoin Standard book, but the first one was Nassim Taleb, but then he just went full retard. So Saifedean had to search for another one. And this is probably the most popular brand of maximalism on Twitter right now. Laser eyes to the moon, number go up, and that's the branding in a way. That's the meme. So what I would like to, I'm running a little bit long, but let's try to finish in a meaningful way. So these subcultures interact in a non-trivial way. Again, this is a Venn diagram. That means that somebody can be a cypherpunk and a maximalist and a startupper. For example, again, Adam Beck was one of the original cypherpunks, but he's also a speculator, and he's certainly a maximalist. So these are not mutually exclusive. But some of the people inside these subcultures, they perceive this subculture as exclusive, and they have a very low opinion of everything else. For example, cypherpunks, they tend to call everybody else statist LARPers, basically. LARPers mean, live action role play. So it means that you're not really doing stuff. You're just pretending you are. You're just a LARPer. You dress up like an activist, but you know nothing. You don't build anything. Cypherpunks write code. What do? You just write books. You just create companies. You just teach people. You translate documentation. That's LARPing. Cypherpunks just write code. And you're so statist because if you are not a strict crypto anarchist, then you're basically a fascist. Which, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree, but they are very, very strong in this us versus them distinction. And of course, there is that doesn't mean that there is nothing I could call statism in the cypherpunk field. For example, the cypherpunks tend to, some of them at least on this extreme, they tend to be very much, science cultists. I would call them. They so if the government is forcing everybody to do something because of religion, so because Jesus or Allah says so, then that's bad, and we should justify the government. But if the same government will impose the same kind of stuff because of science, which was something especially important in the last 3 years of coronazism, then many of these guys, we are against the government, but pro Fauci or stuff like that. So there is some level of statism here as well. But everybody else is a statist LARPer. Then for maximalists, everybody else, so for some people here, basically, everybody else is just a shitcoin scammer. Which, I mean, again, I'm pretending to be neutral here, but I understand this sentiment, and it's basically true. And so many of these will just consider everybody here a shitcoin scammer. Are you using Monero because you are trying to be very aggressive about privacy? You are a shitcoin scammer. Are you experimenting with Ethereum because you want to create some cool startup or use case? Well, you are a shitcoiner. Are you just buying and selling Shiba Inu meme coin? You are a shitcoiner. So this is the perception of the pure maximalist versus everybody else, and this is basically what is often at the center of some Twitter drama, because here on the other extreme you have what I call the Antima, just like Antifa, but in this case they're Antima. Their whole Twitter presence is about fighting Bitcoin maximalism, and that's the only reason for their life and interaction. The typical Yudi and Eric and so on. And then you have for the startuppers, for some startuppers here, everybody else in the spectrum will just be a toxic asshole. So we are the one that can talk with people, institutions, and government, and the market, and we can actually bring on adoption. And you guys are just you're just basically driving everybody away. You cannot you are bad at marketing. You are scaring people away and stuff like that. So these are the basic conflicts here. The nice thing of these conflicts is that everybody is fighting with everybody else. This is the a beautiful Bitcoin meme. Brothers and sisters are natural enemies, just like shitcoiners and Bitcoiners, or bankers and Bitcoiners, or statists and Bitcoiners, or Bitcoiners and other Bitcoiners. Them Bitcoiners, they've ruined Bitcoin. You Bitcoiners sure are a contentious people. You just made an enemy for life. But before I end, and sorry, Rockstar, if I'm a little bit long, but just cut me off if I'm getting too long. I would like to enter a little bit more into some of the conflicts, which I think are very important. One is the fact that cypherpunk are really focused on privacy, which I think is very, very important. Privacy is the main thing about crypto anarchism and the cypherpunk movement. While some of the speculators, they just want to make money, they don't like privacy, they want auditability. They like the startuppers, they want auditability not to scare off the government. And the Austrians, the maximalists, they want auditability because scarcity is very important. Indeed, maximalism, while the startuppers, they specialize on adoption. They really want mass adoption. That's the goal. Bitcoin must be adopted. While the idealists, they mostly want purity. They are ready to sacrifice some adoption if they can keep Bitcoin pure. They are thinking, or our thinking is, we already have the alternative, which is fiat. Stay there if you don't need something radical. If you need Bitcoin, you need Bitcoin, uncompromised, without any kind of watering down. There is a good article by Alex Vesky about basically expanding an idea of Francis Puyot about the remnant, the Bitcoin remnant. Give it a read; it's very, very good. Then maximalists, they especially think about scarcity, not just scarcity in the scarcity of Bitcoin, like the importance of the 21 million limit, the importance of the inflation schedule, the difficulty adjustment, the halving, but also scarcity in general, economics, basically. The economical science is the science of managing scarcity, so dealing with scarce resources. So there is a strong focus on scarcity, and scarcity means, for example, no shit coins, because digital scarcity cannot be reproduced indefinitely. And it also means not changing Bitcoin too much, because you need to, in order to have scarcity, you need some kind of stable framework that cannot be changed by anybody, because otherwise somebody will create inflation eventually. So you need basically immutability of the core functioning of the protocol. So you need this kind of written in stone element to Bitcoin. While on the other hand, the engineers, they don't like scarcity much, because they want to play and they want flexibility. Some of them want flexibility in coins, so they want to use different shit coins for different use cases. Some of them want maybe just Bitcoin, but they want to change it a lot. They want to introduce new codes every year. I mean, we are not so forking this year. What are we even doing? I will just move to Denta coin because there is no innovation here. So there is a lot of tension between the engineering drive to experiment with stuff and the maximalist attention to not breaking the scarcity of Bitcoin. And these I think are very, very strong. I think these six things, they just like some kind of David Starr, they can explain a lot of debates, a lot of fights on Twitter and elsewhere. And not just on Twitter, because some people say that these drama are just Twitter driven. That's not the case, because in physical meetups, I've seen these kind of debates. Maybe they tend to be a little bit more constructive and a little bit less, they are more polite, also because we are all nerds, so we don't like physical confrontation, especially with people like Rockstar. But still, there is a lot of debate in physical meetups as well. There are a few other debates here. For example, cypherpunks, they tend to be realistic. They tend to be adversarial. They tend to think about all the ways Bitcoin could fail. So we should fix this, fix that. There is this threat model. This can be broken. This can be insufficient. We should fix the, the security budget or the privacy, the fungibility, whatever. While the the speculators, they are more like fatalists, like Bitcoin already won. There's this approach like startuppers. They think that Bitcoin already won because if it doesn't, there will be another crypto that will just take over. While maximalists, most of them think that Bitcoin already won because its scarcity, its number go up technology is so strong that it will just fix everything else automatically. Of course, I'm oversimplifying here. This is almost a parody of real positions. And then there is this strong accent of saving. Maximalists are all about saving, hodling, against spending. The engineers, they don't like to work on saving use cases because they are not as sexy as spending, moving money around. There are more engineering challenges here than here. Even if like cold storage is a pretty interesting technical challenge, but still most engineers, they like to play with spending use cases. And then there's a very interesting bit, which is cypherpunks. They were perceived on topics different from Bitcoin as a part of a contrarian subculture, a counter culture again. So they were, for example, if you think about the 80s, the late 80s and the 90s, cypherpunks were weird guys. Most of them, they were like the mainstream guys. They were like suits. They were just dressing suits, and they were in ties. They were about money, especially in the 90s. They were Wall Street guys, and these guys were actually dressing hoodies, and some of them in conferences they wear masks. Like other Bitcoiners are not like that. Some cypherpunks, they are very strange. They may cover their face during conferences. They may have a particular nerdy subculture, while most other Bitcoins, especially the speculators, they tend to be very mainstream. But what is interesting is that this was especially true in the 80s and the 90s. Now, this kind of cultural contrarianism, even even if it may not be the norm across large part of the world population, it is almost the norm in the mainstream representation. So if you watch movies or TV series or books, this is actually pretty normal to be like a vegan, polyamorous, privacy obsessed nerd with a hoodie. While right now and we go back to the Bitcoin fundamentalist meme, it's actually the more conservative oriented approach of some maximalists, which is perceived as contrarian. Maybe not contrarian with the actual population, because most of the population of this planet is religious, while most of the mainstream representation of the culture is strongly anti-religious, or the things we have seen in the memes, like guns and meat and this kind of stuff. And in this case, it's more like the engineers, which are usually more mainstream. Like for everything which is not strictly Bitcoin related, engineers tend to basically follow. Some engineers, of course, some of them, they tend to follow the same kind of mainstream idea or meme or the current thing. You can imagine them, about vaccines, about nutrition, about climate change and carbon dioxide. While these guys usually they come from the angle in which, since Bitcoin showed us that everything the mainstream experts were saying about the economics was wrong, so the monetary experts were wrong on everything. So maybe other kinds of experts, including like nutrition experts or climate experts, may be wrong as well, or maybe malicious as well. So there is a lot of contrarian culture going on in this side, which is actually, if you go back to the beginning of the presentation, Vlad, the developer, has a very nerdy but pretty mainstream kind of cultural framing, while the original Bitcoin fundamentalist meme was pretty contrarian on that point of view. Last
Yeah.
slide. Okay, this is just the last slide. I just want to say that the fight between privacy and scarcity is the most important fight to watch right now, because I think both sides need to win in order for Bitcoin to win, because privacy is fundamental for saving. If you don't have privacy, you cannot save, because your money will appreciate but it will be confiscated. And saving is important for privacy, because if you don't move money, it's easier to stay private. Scarcity is important to spending, because scarcity will basically help money to emerge from barter, and vice versa. So okay, let's stop it here, because I already finished 1 hour without even the question. I hope we can
Yeah.
still do the questions now. Sorry, the timing is
Well,
never my strong.